Right now, as you are watching this, USG's seismographs have recorded significant earthquakes in 6 different American states within a single 72-hour window. And the question flooding social media, local news comment sections, and the USG's own public inquiry line is the same one in this video's title, Is Something Building? Here is the sequence. On August 1, 2026, a magnitude 6.4 earthquake struck the Aleutian Islands of Alaska, 90 kilometers southeast of Adak, prompting a brief tsunami advisory that was canceled within 90 minutes. 8 hours later, a magnitude 5.3 shook western Nevada near Hawthorne, felt across the state line in California's eastern Sierra and as far as Reno. On August 2nd, a magnitude 4.8 struck the Permian Basin of West Texas near Midland, strong enough to crack drywall and knock items from shelves across a region that 2 decades ago almost never felt earthquakes at all. The same day, a magnitude 4.2 hit north-central Oklahoma near Pawnee. On August 3rd, a magnitude 4.6 struck central Idaho in the mountains north of Stanley. And late that same night, a magnitude 4.1 rattled southeastern Missouri near New Madrid, the name that makes every earthquake scientist in America sit up straighter, on the fault system that produced the most powerful earthquakes in the recorded history of the continental United States. 6 states, 72 hours: Alaska, Nevada, Texas, Oklahoma, Idaho, Missouri. Today we are going to break down every one of these 6 events, what fault produced it, whether it is normal for that location, and what it actually tells us. We are going to answer the title's question directly and honestly. And along the way, we are going to cover one of the most remarkable and least known stories in American seismology, the state that accidentally made itself the earthquake capital of the lower 48, and then deliberately turned it off. No guessing, no dramatizing, just the seismology, the data, and the real stakes. Drop a comment right now. Did you feel any of these 6 earthquakes in Alaska, Nevada, Texas, Oklahoma, Idaho, or Missouri? Tell me your state, your town, and what it felt like. And here is a second question for everyone else. Before today, did you know that Texas and Oklahoma have earthquakes at all? Because the answer to why they do is one of the strangest stories in modern geology, and I want to know how many of you have heard it. Subscribe right now if you want every significant American seismic event and USGS finding covered as it happens. Completely free. A thumbs up helps this reach people in all 6 affected states looking for real answers instead of speculation. Let us go for 6,000 likes on this one. Now, let us take these 6 earthquakes one at a time, because each one has a completely different explanation. Alaska first, because it is the largest and the least surprising. The magnitude 6.4 in the Aleutians occurred on the Aleutian subduction zone, the plate boundary where the Pacific plate dives beneath North America at roughly 7 centimeters per year along a 3,000-kilometer arc. This is one of the most seismically productive structures on Earth. Alaska records more earthquakes than the other 49 states combined, roughly 40,000 per year, and a magnitude 6.4 in the Aleutians is an event that happens multiple times in a typical year. It produced no damage because the Aleutian chain is nearly unpopulated at that segment. The tsunami advisory was precautionary and correctly canceled when tide gauges showed no significant wave. Verdict on Alaska, completely routine for one of the planet's great subduction zones. Nevada is more interesting because Nevada sits on a fault system most Americans have never heard of, even though it accommodates a fifth of the entire boundary motion between the Pacific and North American plates. It is called the Walker Lane, a 700-kilometer corridor of faults running along the Nevada-California border, east of the Sierra Nevada, from the Mojave Desert up past Reno. The San Andreas system takes up roughly 80% of the plate boundary's motion. The Walker Lane quietly absorbs most of the rest, about 1 centimeter per year of shear distributed across dozens of individual faults. Some geologists argue the Walker Lane is the plate boundary's future, that over millions of years the main boundary may migrate inland from the San Andreas to this corridor. Magnitude 5.3 near Hawthorne is consistent with the region's steady background of moderate events. Nevada is the 3rd most seismically active state in the country after Alaska and California, and events of this size occur there every year or two. Verdict on Nevada: normal behavior for an underappreciated but genuinely significant fault system. Now Texas and Oklahoma, and here the story changes completely, because these earthquakes are not natural in origin. They are induced. And the tale of how that was discovered, fought over, and ultimately managed is the contrast case at the heart of this video. 2 decades ago, Oklahoma averaged 1 or 2 felt earthquakes per year. Then, beginning around 2009, something extraordinary happened. The state's earthquake rate exploded. By 2015, Oklahoma was recording over 900 magnitude 3+ earthquakes per year, more than California. A state with no plate boundary, no major active fault system in the conventional sense, had become the most seismically active place in the lower 48. In 2016, a magnitude 5.8 struck near Pawnee, the largest earthquake in Oklahoma's recorded history, damaging buildings and injuring one person. The cause was wastewater injection. Oil and gas production in the region brings up enormous volumes of ancient salty water along with the hydrocarbons, and the industry disposes of it by injecting it into deep rock formations, primarily a layer called the Arbuckle Group that sits directly above the ancient crystalline basement. That basement is laced with old faults that have been sitting locked and stable for hundreds of millions of years, holding modest tectonic stresses that were never enough to make them slip. The injected water changed that. It raised the fluid pressure inside the faults, effectively unclamping them, reducing the friction holding them shut until the old stresses were suddenly sufficient to produce earthquakes. Humans did not create the stress, humans released it. For several years, the connection was scientifically contested and politically radioactive in a state whose economy runs on oil and gas. But the seismological evidence became overwhelming. The earthquakes clustered around injection wells, tracked injection volumes in time, and occurred at basement depths consistent with the pressure diffusion. And then Oklahoma did something that deserves far more attention than it gets. It acted. Beginning in 2015 and 2016, the Oklahoma Corporation Commission ordered operators across the affected zones to cut injection volumes into the Arbuckle by 40% and shut down wells nearest to active earthquake clusters. The result is one of the cleanest natural experiments in the history of geology. Oklahoma's earthquake rate fell off a cliff, from over 900 magnitude 3+ events in 2015 to fewer than 60 per year by the early 2020s. A human-caused earthquake crisis, identified by science, contested by industry, and then substantially solved by regulation within half a decade. The magnitude 4.2 near Pawnee this week is part of the diminished residual, the slow, ongoing adjustment of a system that was destabilized and is still settling. West Texas is the same story, one chapter behind. The Permian Basin, the most productive oil field in America, ramped up production and wastewater injection through the 2010s and 2020s, and its earthquake rate followed the Oklahoma curve upward. The region around Midland, Odessa, and Pecos now produces regular magnitude 4 and occasional magnitude 5+ events, including a magnitude 5.4 near Pecos in 2022, the largest in the region's modern record. Texas regulators have begun imposing injection restrictions in designated seismic response areas following the Oklahoma playbook, and the early data suggests it is beginning to work, though the Permian's vastly larger injection volumes make it a harder system to stabilize. The magnitude 4.8 near Midland this week is exactly what an induced seismicity province in mid-management looks like. Verdict on Texas and Oklahoma, real earthquakes, human origin, and living proof that this particular hazard responds to policy within years, not centuries. Idaho's magnitude 4.6 belongs to yet another system, the Centennial Tectonic Belt, the arc of extensional faulting that wraps around the Yellowstone region as the North American crust stretches. Central Idaho produced a magnitude 6.5 near Stanley in March 2020, the state's largest in nearly 40 years, and the aftershock zone of that event, plus the region's normal background, makes a 4.6 unremarkable. No connection to Yellowstone's volcanic system, despite what the region's geography tempts people to assume. These are crustal stretching faults, and the Yellowstone Volcano Observatory's monitoring of the caldera itself shows normal background levels. Verdict on Idaho, standard Basin and Range extension. And then Missouri, the magnitude 4.1 near New Madrid is, by pure numbers, the smallest of the 6 events. It is also the one the seismological community watches most carefully, because it occurred inside the New Madrid seismic zone, the mid-continent fault system that in the winter of 1811 and 1812 produced 3 earthquakes estimated between magnitude 7.5 and 8.0, events that rang church bells in Boston and temporarily reversed stretches of the Mississippi River. We covered the New Madrid system in depth in a recent video, the 34% rise in microseismicity over 18 months, the June 2026 geodetic study suggesting strain accumulation above modeled rates, and FEMA's 86,000 casualty planning scenario for a repeat event. A magnitude 4.1 is within the zone's normal background. The system produces roughly 200 small earthquakes per year, and magnitude 4 events occur every year or two. It does not signal an imminent rupture. But it is a scheduled reminder that the most dangerous fault in the central United States is alive, loading, and sitting beneath cities that, unlike California's, have no earthquake culture, no shake alert coverage, and a vast stock of unreinforced masonry. So, is something building? Let us answer the title's question directly. No, not in the sense the question implies. These 6 earthquakes occurred on 6 unconnected systems: a subduction zone, a distributed shear corridor, 2 induced seismicity provinces, an extensional belt, and an intraplate ancient rift. They do not share a cause, they cannot trigger one another across those distances, and their arrival in the same 72 hours is statistical clustering, not coordination. The continental United States records roughly 20,000 earthquakes per year. Windows in which multiple states record felt events are not rare. They are the normal texture of a seismically active continent, made newly visible by the fact that everyone now carries a seismograph-adjacent device called a phone, and every event reaches every feed. But here is the honest second half of the answer. Nothing is building between these events is not the same as nothing is building. Something is always building, on every locked fault in this story. The Aleutian Zone is loading toward its next great earthquake. The Walker Lane is absorbing a centimeter of shear per year. New Madrid is accumulating strain at rates the newest data suggests we underestimated. The question worth asking is never whether a random 72-hour cluster is a signal. It is whether the specific communities above each of these systems are prepared for the event their own fault will eventually deliver on its own schedule. And in Memphis, in St. Louis, in the towns of the Wabash and Mississippi valleys, the honest answer remains no. Let us be direct about what to do with all of this. If you are in any of the 6 states, the single most valuable action after a felt earthquake is to file a report on the USCA's Did You Feel It system. Those crowdsourced intensity reports are genuine scientific data. They map how shaking actually distributed, calibrate hazard models, and improve the building codes that protect the next generation. It takes 2 minutes. If you are in Texas or Oklahoma, know that induced earthquakes are real earthquakes. The shaking is identical to natural events of the same magnitude, and that the mitigation lever is regulatory, which means it responds to public attention. The Oklahoma turnaround happened because the science was clear and the pressure to act became irresistible. And if you are anywhere in the central United States, the new Madrid preparedness basics apply regardless of this week's 4.1. Secure heavy furniture. Know your gas shutoff. Keep 72 hours of water and supplies. Participate in the Great Shakeout Drill in October. The fault does not need to be in the news to be loading. Final thought. 6 earthquakes in 6 states in 72 hours is not a warning. It is a portrait. A snapshot of a continent that is seismically alive from the Aleutian Trench to the Mississippi embayment, in more ways and for more reasons than most Americans ever learn. One of those reasons is a plate boundary. One is a boundary that may be slowly relocating. 2 are the unintended consequence of industrial fluid injection, and the proof that when humans cause earthquakes, humans can also stop causing them. 1 is the crust stretching itself thinner, and 1 is a 214-year-old scar in the continent's ancient heart that has not finished what it started in 1811. Nothing connected these 6 events except the calendar. Everything worth worrying about was already true last week, and will still be true next week, when the feeds have moved on. Preparation does not follow the news cycle, neither do faults. We will keep tracking all 6 systems and every significant American seismic development as it happens. Subscribe so you do not miss it, and leave that comment below. Which state were you in, and what did you feel? Because 6 states worth of first-hand accounts is exactly the map this story deserves. 6,000 likes. Let us go.